Welcome back to the Encountermancer. I thought I would do sort of off-the-cuff afterword for episode 1 that was just completed earlier this week. It was a fun project. I'm looking forward to doing more of them. The Assault on Eddistone Point episode was straight out of Dungeon Magazine number 1. It was by Patricia Need Elrod, also known as P.N. Elrod. She's an author. I did a little reading up on her just about a week ago. And she's done a lot since her time with TSR. I think it was TSR. Her time with Dungeons & Dragons, we'll put it that way. But, yeah, she's looks like she's, while with Dungeons & Dragons, she wrote, for example, I think it was Istrad. But her time since then has been, it looks like a lot of sort of gothic fantasy, romance novels, and suspense kinds of things. But, yeah, it looks like she's gone on to do a lot of great things since then. The episodes themselves, one of the things that I stated in sort of my intro video was that I wanted to present D&D modules, adventures, the older editions, written supplements, in sort of their original format, and stay as true as I could to the material. I had made that decision actually after I had written and recorded the first part of that series. So one of the differences, for example, between the work that I did and the original piece by Ms. Elrod is that I changed the cities. I believe the original D&D article it took place in the Old Crystals Mountain between two cities named, what were they? Oh, it was Strafferberg and, I can't remember the other one. It doesn't matter, but I changed them to Kendall and Phandalin and placed the adventure in the Sword Mountains, which is on the Sword Coast. I had already done that and written and recorded it by the time I had decided that I wasn't going to be doing stuff like that going forward. I wasn't going to try to change all of the locations and whatnot to fit within the Sword Coast, but I already had that work done, so we'll just call it done. The reason I decided not to do that was I spent several hours combing through Google Images, looking at maps, pulling out my old Forgotten Realms box set to try to find some maps within that set, just to try to find a location for that to set in. But I realized when I was done with all that, I found the Sword Mountains on 2 different maps from 2 different supplements, I believe. I found 2 different cities, Kendall and Phandalin, that I'm not even sure are in current canon, or I'm not even sure the size of them, actually. I couldn't find much information on either one of them. I sort of presented them both as large city-states because that's what the module required. But I actually have no idea whether or not Kendall and Phandalin are anything more than logging or mining towns. So I just decided after that whole episode that I wasn't going to waste my time with that. We've all plopped Hamlet down on the Sword Coast at some point. You know, we've all done things like that. You just fit it in where you can. And it feels better to just sort of stick to the original works themselves. I just prefer that. So, some interesting things happened along the way. I'm not much of a tech guy, so I kind of muddled my way through it, watched a bunch of YouTube videos on how to use Audacity, which is the recording program that I'm using. I may move into video in the future, but for now, I think I'll just stick with audio. Especially this morning. I'm sitting here, it's about 6 o'clock in the morning, got my coffee, just woke up a couple hours ago. But yeah, you definitely don't want to be seeing me right now. But maybe I'll move into video once I get sort of the audio recording aspects of it down. I'd like to thank the YouTube channel RPGmodsFan. He had a lot of excellent advice on audio recording, the video and editing programs that he uses. He's got a massive library of classic Dungeons & Dragons modules that he reviews, and I really appreciate his help on that. So, big thank you to RPGmodsFan. And some of the just funny or bizarre things that happened along the way is, I believe it was part 2 of Assault on Eddistone Point, Kings or Crowns. I actually wound up recording that twice. I learned the hard way that if you turn on Audacity and then plug in your Yeti microphone, that it doesn't actually register it. It doesn't automatically switch over. You have to do all that stuff manually. If you have it all plugged in, when you fire up Audacity, apparently it just goes right to it. But I recorded the entire thing with my cruddy old laptop microphone, apparently. And when I went to go edit it, I thought, man, this just sounds terrible. What is happening here? And I could not get the episode to come out sounding right, and I realized what I had done eventually. I actually gave it a little tester, recorded a little tester soundbite with my Yeti microphone, and then I unplugged it and recorded it with the laptop microphone. And sure enough, the laptop microphone recorded awful audio, and that's what I had recorded my entire episode with. Because I do that all in one setting. I find that it keeps the audio consistent. It just sounds better that way if I don't do a lot of moving around, and I try to be aware of where I'm sitting, how my proximity to the microphone, etc. And of course, there's just a whole different set of background noises when I do 2 different recordings. So yeah, I recorded the entire thing with the laptop microphone, and it sounded terrible. And I'd sit down and redo the whole thing. Now, because I had done that, my children were awake because it was much later in the morning when I sat down to record the thing again, because I was just hell-bent on getting it done that day, so I could get the editing done and get the episode out. But there's one part when they're scrying, or when the druid's pool is showing them images of demons charging down the mountain. If you listen right at that part where I mentioned demons, or the pool showing demons, there's this thump, 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 and it just sort of trails off. That was my daughter upstairs banging on something. And I tried going back and re-recording that bit, but I'm not good enough to make a decent recording snippet and then insert it without it sounding very out of place. So I listened to it a couple of times, trying to figure out what to do, and I realized that maybe if I put just a little dramatic music there, since I had just said the word demons, bum bum bum, that maybe that thump 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 would sort of blend in with the music. And sure enough, it did. Which is why just in the middle of the recording, I say demons, and then there's a sort of dramatic horn blast. And if you listen during that horn blast, there's just sort of this fading boom, 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 boom in the background. So, yeah, that was just one of the goofy things that I kind of had to overcome. Boy, what else happened with that? I guess nothing particularly entertaining. As of recording right now, I believe I've got, right around 10 or 12 subscribers, which I'm happy with. It's not like I'm pumping these episodes out every week. It's been about one a month, which I'm hoping to speed up in the future. And who knows, maybe if this goes a little farther and get onto a more regular schedule with it, barring the family life and all the demands that has, and of course my job. Outside of that, maybe one of these days we'll be able to devote a little more time to it and have these adventures coming out a little faster. As for upcoming projects, I haven't really decided on anything yet. The one thing I have decided is I went through a bunch of the printed modules. I've been listening to a bunch of YouTube channels reviewing that. In particular, RPGmodsFan, who I mentioned already, captcorajus, Mr. Welch, who does a bunch of great Mystara modules. I think pretty much all of the Mystara modules. And several others that I'm forgetting offhand. Those are the ones I've listened to recently. But yeah, great stuff from those channels. Give them a shout out. Go check them out. I'll leave links to their particular channels in the description. But I decided that instead of tackling one of the larger modules, which compared to I believe Assault on Eddistone was about a 5-page magazine article. Tackling some of the larger modules would be quite the undertaking, so I'm going to ramp up to that. I'll be waiting before I do any of those particular classics. I think for now, at least the next one or two, I'll probably stick to some of the or more of the dungeon adventures. There's a lot of great stuff in there. A lot of the contributors to those articles went on to do other works for D&D, or went on to have careers in writing, or some of them halted successful careers in writing to submit stuff to dungeon magazines. So yeah, there's a lot of talent in those pages, and a lot of them are laid out very simple. And they're not even, some of them aren't even very short modules. They're just presented very simply. And of course, that helps a lot when you're trying to write a story, do a dramatization of that adventure. So, yeah, I think for now, the point is that I'll be doing a couple of more dungeon articles instead of moving on to the mods. I haven't picked a particular one. I am currently reading through a promising one called Perlman's Curiosity. I don't have it in front of me. I don't recall the author, but it should be easy enough to find if you'd like to look it up. But Perlman's Curiosity looks like a fun one. It involves a not quite mad wizard, but certainly an unethical one, dropping a little experiment into the middle of town and watching the resultant chaos, and the adventurers sort of walk right into the middle of that. But yeah, that one looks like a lot of fun. Certainly lots of opportunities for good dialogue and jokes, and a lot of character building. On the subject of those characters, in this writing experience, it's been I've really been enjoying sort of the character development that's been going on, just in my own head. I had very basic layouts for the crew. I didn't flesh them out particularly well in the beginning. They had sort of vanilla personalities, but they're really kind of growing in my head, and I'm really going to enjoy not only writing about these characters and the trials that they go through, but I've been taking it a lot further, and thinking of expanding on their origin story and their people, the Obe that they come from. So I don't know, maybe I'll do some mini episodes sort of fleshing out the folk of Seaholm. I guess I just refer to them generically as the clans, but I don't know. That's one thing that I need to do before I start getting their background together, is actually come up with a name for them. Of course, there's the Obes, which is just sort of the generic name for all of the different individual groups of wandering clans. But yeah, I'm really enjoying sort of fleshing them out, and I look forward to sort of... I think a lot of these adventures the crew is going to be going on will be in pursuit of sort of a larger story arc that will involve Obiosal, the other clans, and as mentioned, Seaholm itself, which, as of yet, I haven't really fleshed out what this sort of evil power that took over their island is, but I think that'll come in good time. And as these characters level up, as it were, they will be facing greater and greater dangers. I'll start tying more of the story arc involving Seaholm into it, and perhaps eventually I will get to an entirely homebrewed adventure involving their attempts to destroy whatever it was that took over their island. Funny thing about how this entire thing started, I was actually flipping through a PDF that had a bunch of second edition monsters in it, and I can't remember what exactly it was called, but I came across, it was basically an animated wagon. It was just a picture of an animated wagon, and it was just this walking wagon. And that sort of kicked off this entire thing that eventually became Obiosal. I was just really in love with the idea of a sort of a traveling caravan of nothing but walking wagons, and sort of all the interesting things that you would run into there. And I thought, well, how do I turn the used stereotype of the gypsy on its ear? And I thought, well, what other cultures would be interesting to slip into a sort of nomadic caravan setting? I thought, well, maybe Vikings, and that's kind of the flavor that I was going for. Were sort of raiders who had lost their home, their base of operation, their island, and now are sort of wandering clans. And maybe, I guess the idea there was that when they fled their home, they were not well received anywhere they went. They were sort of pushed to the margins, wound up in pretty bad and savage territories, and the few attempts that were made to create a city or a permanent location for them to live met with failure of one kind or another, in the form of orc raids or monsters or natural disaster, because they were pushed out into these more savage territories, these untamed wildernesses, and their attempts to tame them ultimately failed. So an already devastated population would have been reduced even further, and in desperation they just fled these attempts at new homelands and wound up sort of wandering the land, not quite welcome anywhere, but as time went on, they just continued wandering. I'm not quite sure where the walking wagons will have entered into the equation, but perhaps there'll be a historic figure that started creating these things, and the tradition was just carried on. He's sort of credited with saving the folk of the Obes by making these better, faster wagons instead of relying on teams of horses or oxen, wagon wheels, etc. He created a system where they could travel many places that wheeled carts simply could not go, or not easily. Excuse me there. As I said, this is just going to be kind of an off-the-cuff thing. I'm just kind of rambling here. So we'll just leave everything in, warts and all. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with Obiosal. I plan on fleshing them out even more. I think I'm really liking this idea of the crewing, that all of the different clans. This is... Oh, I forgot to mention this. Where Eric and the crew are at now, this is maybe a couple centuries after their people fled their homeland. And kind of in the... They're not entirely sure what destroyed their island. What destroyed their city and took over their island, and why they had to flee in the first place, because not a lot was known about whatever it was. A lot of information and a lot of people more directly involved were lost, either when the island was taken or in later years as settlements that they tried to establish were destroyed. So it's sort of a fragmentary history that they're dealing with, and I think I'll have sort of a... Perhaps there's a particular clan that sort of keeps all of the information that is known about the island. They sort of keep those records. And perhaps they'll go visit that Obe to get that information. Perhaps that'll be sort of part of their stated mission in becoming a crew. Will be a visit to these lore keepers. I've got a lot of fragmentary sort of ideas about the clans, but I'm really looking forward to fleshing them out. I really like the idea of Viking caravans with walking wagons. So that'll be a lot of fun to explore. I like the characters. Yes, by the way, this whole naming thing, I shamelessly stole it from Joe Abercrombie. If you haven't read Joe Abercrombie's books, they are amazing. They are fantastic fantasy fiction. One of the best authors that I've ever read. And his books just keep getting better. He's put out a lot of works, although he hasn't put much out in the last couple of years, but there for a few years he was just churning them out. So maybe he had kind of a backlog of works that he had already had started. But whatever he's working on now, I can't wait to see what comes next. I think of his works, current published works, my favorite by far is The Heroes. It's a great book, but read them all in order. His first trilogy, the First Law trilogy, had some kinks in it, but the characters were so amazing and the setting was so great that, yes, I shamelessly stole from his sort of northern... I don't remember what they were called now. Northerners, I guess, generically called, but I stole some ideas from his Northerners portrayal, just because they were so great. And but moving forward, I'm excited to find a new adventure to get started on. As I said, Perlman's Curiosity might be its possibility. I actually found at least one other adventure printed in Dungeon Magazine, also by Ms. Elrod. And I don't know, maybe I'll just do another one of hers. She had some really, really great stuff. I forget the name of it, but she's got one that's set in a library. That's a possibility. There's lots of fun stuff in Dungeon Magazine. It's a shame they don't have that out still. That was a great publication. If you have any requests of adventures that you would like to see made into Dungeons and Dragons audio dramas, leave a comment below. Share these videos around. Of course, I suggest you start with episode 0, setting up the backstory of Obiosel and Eric and the crew. But share them around. Interaction with the videos themselves will get them seen by more people. The more you interact with them, the more they'll be boosted up. And we're a long way from having any kind of substantial subscription base, but there it is. Every little bit helps. And the more eyes we can get these videos in front of, the more the channel will grow, and hopefully the more time I can dedicate to creating these videos. It was a lot of fun. A big thank you to my wife. I believe it was part 2, Kings or Crowns. She made me a sound box, which I'm actually using right now. For any of you out there that do audio recordings, look into how to make a sound box. It's really simple. You get just a Sterilite tub, any kind of Rubbermaid tub, something like that, and you fill it with just basic foam. And you can buy both of them. You can go to Walmart and spend $20, and boom, you've got your tub and a roll of foam, and it massively improves the sound quality. I'm very grateful to her. She snuck out of the house one day and she went over to her friends and made it in secret and then brought it home for me. I was very surprised, and I'm very happy with how it has improved the quality of the audio. So yeah, I'm hoping that more little projects and discoveries like this will be coming, and that we can continue to up the quality of this. Of course, I learned a lot about Audacity and how to create quality audio, and I've got a lot left to learn, but that's part of the fun of the process, right? You don't get skills by just picking them up out of the mud. So yeah, got a lot of work to do, and I'm looking forward to doing it. Thank you, everybody, to all my subscribers, and here's to the next adventure.